So John, thank you for coming for this interview. Now, you left Kenya about 3 years ago under this shroud of fear because of revelations on corruption. You come back into the country after 3 years and the headlines are once again corruption. What's your take on the whole corruption, anti-corruption war?
I think there's a sense in which we are still under a cloud of corruption, but it's Kenya has changed dramatically now. Scandals like Goldenberg and Anglo Leasing were abstractions to the common mwananchi. The figures were huge, the transactions were complicated. What's happening now is different in that, especially when you talk about the scandals in the maize sector and in the energy sector to do with petroleum and oil, it has a direct impact on the price that people pay for Kenya's staple product, maize. And that is very immediate, it's very live, and it hits people in the pocket in a very direct sort of way. So the level of anger is higher, in part because we will feel the pain a lot more.
You've had an opportunity to travel across the country. You've been speaking, many people don't know this, you've been at the grassroots speaking to a lot of Kenyans. What is your sense, John, of what they feel about the past year, what they've gone through, what they've learned?
Number one, people are very clear about what's going on. People aren't confused or befuddled or or conned by the rackets that are being carried out. People are very clear about what's going on. Number one. Number two, one sees and feels the impact of the media, of mobile telephones, in terms of informing people about their circumstances. I think that's a positive thing. Thirdly, as I said before, people are now drawing a very clear line between poor leadership and their poverty, between corruption and their deteriorating economic circumstances.
John, I recall interviewing you about 4 years ago, and at that time you were still in government, still fighting the corruption fight. And you said to me after the show, big fish are going to go down. You were convinced that any day we were going to see big ministers, senior ministers, we call them in Kenya, going down. You talked about your belief that the goodwill of the head of state is what would keep the anti-corruption fight going. Then, soon after that, you left the country. What are your thoughts now looking back on all that?
One, I think shock sets in over time, and it's usually one is able to rationally analyze a situation and see that actually you've reached the end of what you're able to do. Emotionally, it's more difficult because you're wedded to particular situations, you have a life that you're living, and therefore it takes more time to untangle yourself emotionally. What was clear, and I think remains clear, is that the political will to fight corruption from the very top wasn't there, isn't there now. However, the kind of pressure that we are seeing this time from the bottom up, I think is going to force some of the changes that need to happen for us to be able to address these things a bit more seriously. Coming back at this time, for me, the most important change that has happened in Kenya, in a sense sad, is what happened in 2007 when we had a failed election. And the ground moved under our feet. We now have a coalition government that we didn't have before. I got a call from the Prime Minister, and the Vice President said, come back, things have changed. As you said, some of the corruption-related issues haven't changed as much as they should have. But it was clear that after the violence that took place in 2007, 2008, Kenya's a changed place. And the situation that we have in Kenya today, let no one, and this is the thing about Nairobi which is so deceptive. It's a little bubble that we live in. We're actually in the middle of a very fluid situation and a very unstable situation. We continually try to reaffirm to ourselves, no, everything is okay. But if one looks at some of the fundamental indicators, it's still quite shaky. And I think it's important for us to keep that at the back of our minds. So it's something that you think about all the time, and you can't take anything for granted.
You know, the truth is that a lot of the people who you believe to have been behind the threats on your life and behind the corruption are still not behind bars. So are you really safe? Do you feel safe? You've had assurances that you can come back.
I sat, with a friend. I wouldn't say, from a West African country who was in a similar position to mine not too long ago, and we had a long, several hours conversation, and he'd had a much more difficult time than I'd had. They tried to shoot at him, and it's a very, very awkward situation. And then one realization that we came to was that it never goes back to normal. It never goes back to normal.
You live with
It
that.
never becomes okay. You are judging it all the time.